What is up, y'all, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Scotty Holiday. I'm a queer creator and a huge Star Wars nerd, so if you're into either one of those things, please consider subscribing for more. In this video, I'm going to be reviewing Andor Episode 8, titled Narkina 5. This episode was pretty intense emotionally and kind of a downer if I'm being honest. The Empire is really showing its might and cracking down on the galaxy hard in the aftermath of Aldhani. Throughout the episode, we see our heroes really struggling to stay afloat under the Imperial hand, and poor Cassian just seems so hopeless. But all in all, I still really enjoyed the episode. Now before I get into my review, please make sure to like this video and leave a comment letting me know what you thought of Episode 8. I'm putting out weekly reviews for each new episode of the Andor series, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out. I've put a link in the cards and in the description to my Andor series playlist where you can check out all of my previous Andor videos as well. Now, let's dive into this review. The episode begins catching up with Cassian after he's apprehended by the Empire. We get to really see how cruel and brutal the Empire treats its prisoners from the beginning, and these themes really carry throughout the episode. The troopers round up the prisoners and file them through tight corridors on their way to their respective prison shuttles. Once inside, Cassian and the other prisoners are told to remove their shoes and are forcefully locked into their seats by cuffs as the ship takes off. This whole process felt a bit demeaning, and the overall brutality of the troopers and guards screaming at the prisoners was a bit uncomfortable to watch. Sure, these people are prisoners, but they're also people. These opening scenes gave me a lot of anxiety because I knew things were only going to get worse from here. Once they arrive at the factory on Narkina 5, Cassidy and the other prisoners are dropped off and greeted by the guards of the facility. This scene really sets an overall bleak tone for what to expect at the facility, which is furthered when one of the other prisoners tells Cassian, "Breathe deep, brother, this may be the last fresh air we ever taste." As the head guard explains what to expect during their stay, he says they may be surprised by their minimally invasive enforcement techniques, but I consider this to be an understatement. It's in this first scene that Cassian and the other prisoners learn of the tungstoid steel floors, and as the guard pushes the button to electrocute them, or as they call it, fry them, we all get a true taste of the cruel nature of the facility. The overall presence of the head guard made me super uncomfortable, and he even lets out a truly unhinged smile as he watches the prisoners struggle in pain. I could feel a pit growing in my stomach as he spoke to Cassian and the others, but my heart really sank when he pushed that button. As they get Cassian assigned to his floor position and team, we really get a sense of how they run this facility. The prisoners are basically treated more like slaves or machines on an assembly line than actual people. The prison facility works on a performance-based initiative to make the prisoners feel as though they're being rewarded for the work they do, when in reality, it's all just a way to control them into being workhorses. Those who fall behind in their work are punished by being fried. It feels very similar to the use of negative reinforcement used by shot callers and pet training, which alone just tells you how less than the prisoners are treated. Cassian's integrated into his table and team by the unit manager, Kino Loy, played by Andy Serkis. For those who may not know, Andy Serkis is also the actor behind Snoke in the sequel trilogy. The whole sequence felt so stressful and chaotic, and I honestly hated being in that room. I was just so ready to get out of there. After their shift, as the prisoners are waiting to go back to their cell block, we see one of Cassian's table members, Taga, doing some form of signing to another prisoner across the facility halls, which Cassian notices as well. We don't actually know what the signing means or what they're even communicating to each other, but it's definitely intriguing to say the least. As Cassian's table member Jembok explains the details of the rack and cell block, the other prisoners start asking Cassian about information on the Public Order Resentencing Directive, or PORD, which we first learned about from Colonel Yularen in Episode 7. The prisoners explain that due to the rebel activity, the Empire has doubled and even tripled prison sentences for those already incarcerated, even though they clearly had nothing to do with it. Ulaf even says that they're the ones getting punished for the actions of the rebels. Melshi tells Cassian that regardless of their sentence, the Empire will keep its prisoners in there until they're not wanted anymore, saying getting out at this point is only a dream. Towards the end of the Narkina 5 sequence, there's a really sad scene where one of the other prisoners in Cassian's unit makes the decision to step onto the hot floor during the middle of the night, and the sound of the shock and scream was just really heartbreaking. I know I would wake up in a full panic if I were sleeping in that same cell block. And sadly, the other prisoners don't show any sympathy for the action, and instead complain about him doing it in the middle of the night, more worried about the smell and how it will affect their work tomorrow than the tragedy of the act. I was definitely not mentally prepared for this scene, but it really put into perspective how truly horrible things must have been in the facility. Throughout the scenes on Narkina 5, Cassian looks so defeated, and it was really just heartbreaking for me to see. My mental health would really deteriorate fast if I was locked up in there, and I'm not sure how long I would last, to be honest. Not only is Cassian in there for crimes he didn't commit, but the prisoners already incarcerated are being punished for crimes they didn't commit. Just like in real-world private for-profit prisons, the prison facility on Narkina 5 is exploiting the prisoners and profiting by keeping them behind bars longer than their initial sentences with no intention of reintegrating them into society. The more people they bring in, the more work they can do for the Empire. I think there's also something more going on in there with the prisoners, but we'll just have to wait and see what happens. It's also crazy to see that there are no alien species within the facility, and given the racism and xenophobia we know the Empire exudes toward non-humans, I can only imagine where alien prisoners are sent and the conditions they endure. We do get another shower scene on Narkina 5, though this one is way less sexy and just reads as really sad. I wouldn't have minded seeing Zal in that scene though, or for the camera to go down a little lower, but I guess I forgot I was watching a Disney Plus show. The next thing I want to talk about is Dedra and the ISB. Dedra's twink bestie assistant arrives at the Bureau of Standards to retrieve Syril for interrogation at the ISB headquarters. We learn that he's been trying to get data records on Cassian, and Dedra questions him on his motives, plus to fill in some gaps on the Ferrix report about Luthen's involvement and identity. It's pretty funny too because in episode 7, Lieutenant Blevin refers to Dedra as a renegade intelligence officer, and Syril is kind of doing the same thing in his search for Cassian. Syril doesn't remember much on Luthen's appearance and essentially pleads to let him join the Empire in their search, realizing there's more importance behind finding Andor than Dedra is letting on. But she shuts him down. He wants to be in the Empire so bad, and it was so satisfying seeing Dedra basically tell him to fuck off and go home. Dedra's efforts are in full swing as she presents her findings and puts forth requests to drill down on Ferrix to Colonel Yularen and the rest of the ISB supervisors. On top of Cassian, she explains she's also looking for leads on Luthen, who they've dubbed the codename Axis. After a 30-day time jump, we also catch up with Brasso, Bix, and Maarva on Ferrix. We learn that Maarva's sick and physically not doing too well after a fall, but of course she dismisses them, saying she's fine. Now this may be more personal to me, but for anyone who's had or taken care of an elderly family member, this scene hit hard seeing Maarva's health declining and learning of her fall. After weighing their options, Bix and Brasso decide the only thing they can do is try to get in touch with Cassian. Bix desperately attempts to contact Luthen for information via the hidden communications tower in Pack's shop, but gets no reply. The next day, we find out the Empire has taken Pack, the shop owner, and when Bix goes to find out what happened, the Imperials recognize her and take her in for questioning as well. At this point, Dedra's arrived on Ferrix, and she was the one who had Pack brought to the hotel for questioning, with some seriously implied torture. Once Bix arrives, Dedra has Pack dragged out of the room and the officers slam Bix down in the chair next. On top of Dedra, we also learn that Vel and Cinta have been on Ferrix looking for leads on Cassian too. I was so happy to see our girlfriends together again, but that happiness was short-lived. We're not too sure how long they've been there, but the search doesn't seem to be going very well for them either. Cinta mentions staying longer and renting a room on the planet, but even Vel asks her, haven't we been apart long enough? Cinta responds saying, it's not about us. I told you up front the struggle will always come first. She even makes a little jab at Vel saying her cover could be a rich girl running away from her family. Their sequence ends with the scene of Vel riding the transport out of the city, staring blankly, probably questioning if this is the beginning of the end for her and Cinta's relationship, then fades to a scene of Cinta keeping an eye out on the city from her window. I love the way the scene transitions between the two of them and the imagery and emotions it provokes, but it was pretty sad to be honest. It actually gave me similar vibes to Anakin and Padme staring out into the Coruscant skyline in each other's direction in Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith. This isn't the story arc I wanted to see for this queer couple, but I'm still holding out for a happy ending for them. Talking about queer representation, this episode did drop the L-bomb and gave us a true moment of Vel and Cinta holding hands, but I really think we need to see a kiss between them at some pivotal moment to truly show they're a real couple that loves one another and also happens to be queer. Only time will tell. Another sequence I wanted to discuss is the event at Mon Mothma's home on Coruscant. We learn that she's hosting an event to raise votes to help stall the Emperor's PORD legislation. I was surprised to see Tay Kolma in attendance as well, and it's implied that Perrin and Lita aren't too happy about seeing him so often as of late. Once Tay and Mon go off to discuss her banking, Tay informs her of new difficulties due to an increase of Imperial auditors. As she continues to mingle at the event, we hear a conversation between her and some guests discussing Palpatine's actions. One of the guests refers to the Emperor as frustrating, easily provoked, overreactive, and then the real world talking points of, but he says what he means, and if you're doing nothing wrong, it won't affect you. And I couldn't help but roll my eyes. These talking points usually always come from a place of privilege, and that's definitely the case in the context of this episode. Mon and Perrin also speak with another couple who are admiring their view of the city from their home, and during the discussion, it's brought up that Mon and Perrin came to Coruscant at 16, a year after they were married when Mon became a senator. In response, one of the guests says, "That's so romantic," and I'm just like, girl, if you only knew. And then of course, Mon asks Perrin if he's seen Tay right afterwards. Earlier in the episode, Mon even makes a joke to Tay about Perrin being a firebrand at 15, which I had to look up the definition of. A firebrand is a person who is passionate about a particular cause, typically inciting change and taking radical action. And it's so crazy to think of Perrin back then and how he is now. She even says afterwards, how things change, eh? And Tay even takes a dig at him. The firebrand comment really sheds a light on how far not only Perrin, but he and Mon Mothma's relationship has fallen. It makes me wonder if they could have actually been a good match in the beginning of their relationship. Also, they do arranged marriages at 16 on Chandrila, but do they not do divorces? Like, I'm just ready for her to leave Perrin and be with Tay already. Let me know if you agree with me down in the comments below. Now finally, the last thing I want to talk about is Luthen. After Kleya informs him of Bix's transmission, Luthen reluctantly agrees to shut down the Ferrix frequency as a safety measure. As Kleya puts it, and Luthen eventually admits, he's slipping due to the anxiety of knowing Cassian is still out there, putting him at risk of exposure. Later on, Luthen goes to visit Saw Gerrera, attempting to sway Saw into working together with the other rebel cells. Luthen tells him, whatever our final version of success looks like, there's no chance any of us can make it real on our own. He even states that the Empire has a part to play since, according to him, oppression breeds rebellion. But in typical Saw fashion, he believes all the other groups are lost. Luthen even admits that he's terrified that the Empire will become unstoppable unless they all come together and put aside their differences, but of course, Saw dismisses him, claiming he's the only one with clarity of purpose. I had to laugh with Luthen at this statement because Saw is the one who is truly lost at this point. He's so caught up in the fight that he's let it take over every aspect of his life, ripping away his own humanity and making him a shell of the man we met during the Clone Wars series. I hope this isn't the last time we see Saw in the series though, and I'd really love to learn more about he and Luthen's relationship. All in all, this episode was very bleak. I didn't leave it feeling very positive, but I think that was the point. It really showed the Empire coming down hard on the people of the galaxy, and it's only going to make the Rebels' victory so much more impactful going forward. We obviously know that Cassian will get out of the prison on Narkina 5, but I'm very interested to see how it happens. I feel like there was a lot of unspoken insurgents bubbling within the walls of the facility, so I wonder if it will result in some kind of inmate uprising or if some outside force will play a part. Only time will tell. Let me know what you thought of episode 8 down in the comments below, or hit me up on Twitter so we can chat more about it together. I'm putting out weekly reviews for each new episode of Andor as they air, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out. I've added a link to my Andor Series playlist with all my previous episode reviews in the description and on the end screen of this video. Please consider checking them out and leaving a like. I really appreciate all of your support. Make sure to like this video as well and consider subscribing to my channel for more Star Wars content. And to keep up with my latest updates, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram. My links are in the description below. Thank you all for watching as always, and may the Force be with you.